Hi, I'm Ray Poynter, and I want to talk to you about how to use Think, Feel, Do to improve your reports and presentations. Too many presentations and reports are boring. We know that. And the key reason is that they're about delivering data. The focus is what did we do as researchers? What have we found? And trying to pass that information on to the recipients. But actually, we want to create action. We want to create change. We want the people we're talking to do something after they sit through our presentation, or they interact with us through our presentation, or after they read our reports. So we want to be in the process of delivering action. Now, clearly, it's a no-brainer. We should make the presentations and the reports more engaging. We should use engagement techniques. We should use storytelling. We should use visualization. But they are not the reason why we have the presentation. They are a means to an end. And the end is action. We want something to be done after we do the presentation. What we're going to do in this method that I'm talking about, the Think, Feel, Do, is combining think, which is all about the facts. This is the real strong point for market researchers. We're going to combine that with feel, the emotional message, to create the do, the actions we want people to take afterwards. And they all have to work together to create the do. Now, when I say do, there are many, many different types of do. And of course, they all depend on the situation. But every time you write a report, every time you do a presentation, you should be trying to achieve something, a specific outcome or group of outcomes that you think is the best way forward. Now that do might be launch the product or don't launch the product. It might be choose option A or B or C. It might be that you want people to address customer dissatisfaction with check-in, or with the restaurant, or with the room, or with the room service. It might be the do is do more research. Sometimes, and I've been in the situation, the do is really quite bad news. It's we think you should cancel the project. We're not just going to give you a whole bunch of bad scores. We're going to tell you we think you should cancel the project or come up with a massive rethink. Sometimes, and this is when it's good news, keep doing exactly what you are doing. That is a do too. So we always need to know what is the do that we're trying to convey. So how do we find this do that we're trying to convey? Well, we do it by combining three elements. Yes, your data and analysis, and market researchers tend to focus on that, but also the business context and knowledge and the business question that's been addressed. Because if we just combine our data and our analysis with the business question, we're going to ignore the business context. Our recommendations could quite possibly not be viable. We might be suggesting things the company can't do. We might be suggesting things the company has already tried and failed. So we can't ignore the business context. For some business questions, market research isn't even needed, because actually when you combine the business context and the business question, there is an answer. And we as researchers must recognize that there are many ways to answer questions. It's not something to be frightened of. An answer that ignores the business question is irrelevant. This is the worst type of nice to know. It's a nice to know which is a distraction or a digression or avoids providing something useful. So we can't just combine the context and the data and the analysis. We've got to have that question. If we combine all three, then we get the sweet spot. The do is at the intersection of the business question, your data and analysis, and of course the wider business context and knowledge. Now, do has to depend on the emotional message, because changing behavior is hard. From the behavioral economics, we know that changing behavior is hard. The facts do not often change behavior. we have some people listening today from the UK. If you were firmly Remain and somebody said, I think you should vote Leave because here are some facts, you probably wouldn't change your mind. If in America you are firmly in favour of everybody having guns and somebody says, here are some facts, I think you should change your mind, you probably wouldn't change your mind. You would dispute the facts. And this picture here is a wonderful example of how we can confuse facts with message. So I was staying in Tokyo and this photograph was just outside my apartment. And the blue writing in the middle in Japanese says, no bicycles here. And presumably they thought, well, that's not working. So maybe it's English people. So they wrote it, no bicycles parking. Still the bicycles. They've added the symbol for no bicycles, and there are still bicycles. Well, maybe an orange and white beacon isn't strong enough. Let's put a blue flag on it with the same message, no bicycles here. What they're thinking is that people are not understanding the message. That's not the problem. The problem isn't the facts. The problem is that there is not an emotional message which is getting through to the bicycle owners in an incredibly law-abiding country that says, don't park your bicycles here. Saying the same thing over and over again does not change somebody's mind. So how are we going to change behaviour? Behavioural economics talks about the rider, the rational brain, and the elephant, the emotional and the automatic system. And what we need to do is we need to inform the rider. That's the think bit. That's where the facts come in. But we need to motivate the elephant. We need to motivate the emotional system. We need people to feel that what we're telling them is right. We need people to feel that what we want them to do is what they want to do. And we've got to shape the path. We've got to make sure the do is more likely to happen. So what do I mean by shaping the path? If we want people to recycle more waste, we might increase the size of their recycling dustbin and reduce the size of their general waste. If we're talking about a shopping mall and we want people to recycle more, maybe we would have recycling bins all over the place and a general waste bin at a slightly more inconvenient location. Everything around the default option where you have to opt out of being a donor, where you have to opt out of having a pension, are all about shaping the path. We have to make it easier to do the right thing than to do the wrong thing. So how do we find the think? The think process does not start with the data and analysis. This is where market research will often sit down. They will say, how many questions have I got? I'm going to tabulate them. I'm going to cross them. No, it doesn't start there. It starts with the business question. What does the business need to do after we've answered the questions? We really need to understand that. Once we understand that, we want to consider the business context. For example, what information already exists? What's already been tried? And then we're going to conduct our analysis to find the do. We're going to add in our data analysis as the missing ingredient, the secret sauce, the magic mix. And the think is based on facts. Our recommendation of what the company should do or the organization should do is as little to do with emotion and feel as possible. There will be emotion and feeling there, but we want to base our recommendation, the do, on the facts. That's where the do is going to come from. But when we come to try to convince the client, to persuade the recipients of the message to take the actions that will lead to the do, we need to tackle all three elements. We need to inform the rider. We need to motivate the elephant, and we need to shape the path. The do rests on the feel. It's the feel that will make people change their behavior. The feel is driven by the think. We are only going to recommend things which we think are true, which are a good advice, which are based on the information. But we may not use the information in conveying the recommendation. And we certainly won't use the information about how we processed it and how clever we were and what advanced grounded theory techniques or hierarchical bays we used, because it's all around conveying it with the feel. Now, here's a great example from a wonderful book, Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. And this is how a organization used feel to communicate an important message. So back in 1994, a study of USA popcorn found that a medium-sized bag of popcorn had 37 grams of fat. The recommended amount is 20 grams. Now, this presents a challenge. Most people don't know what a gram is or what 20 grams looks like. That is even more the case in the USA, where they don't use the metric system. So how are we going to discourage people from eating too much saturated fat? Well, we could use charts like this, but wow, they don't make you feel like you want to change your behavior. Being told how much fat it is and the blue line is bigger, sorry, the red line is bigger than the blue line isn't going to change anybody's mind. So what they did was they called a press conference, they got a table ready in front of the journalists, and they said one container, one medium-sized bag of popcorn has got the same amount of saturated fat as a fried breakfast, a McDonald's lunch, and a steak dinner. That is what we mean when we're talking about an emotional message. And it's really clear. This is going to make people feel that a medium-sized bag of popcorn is too much. Do you really want a day's worth of junk food fat in one bag of popcorn? That is the story. That's how we move from the think, which is all that scientific evidence they collected, into an emotional message, which creates the do. And the do is very clear. Don't buy the bag of popcorn. Now, what do we want people to do? How do we move from the think, which is the traditional strength of market research, to the feel? We want to move away from study data to narrative flow. And narrative flow provides a direction. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. We don't want to provide all the data. More evidence does not make something more believable. Think about that bicycle sign. Choose the best way to convey the story and use emotions. Move away from data to illustrating what it tells us about people. Bring the data to life by showing individual people using the product. So this person is typical of this situation. Images, charts, cartoons, infographics, all of these can convey emotional messages more powerfully than paragraphs and tables. We use the tables to find the story, and that's the think, but they are not the best way of conveying it. And we need to move away from reporting to persuading. Persuading focuses on trying to get people to do the do. We're not about just accurately reporting information. Just reporting the information accurately is table stakes. We're in the persuasion business. We need to know what it is that we think people should do and then persuade people to do it. I'm going to finish with a tip now. Collect your personal set of examples to help turn think into feel, to create do. So here is one that's very popular on the internet, and it's a great example of the difference between design and actual use. Here are one or two more. This is a picture I took in Auckland. Helps me when I'm talking about confusion. Here is another one about confusion. The sign on the left says, danger, keep out. And it's right next to a wooden step facilitating people entering it. So confused messaging. Here is a fun way. Now we can always personalize our messages. That helps them make them more personal, about illusions. And this is a great piece of modern art installation, which also helps create that illusion again. So we want to be using those sort of things. And if you start collecting these photographs as you go around your daily life, you will do two things. One, you'll have a collection of photographs. But two, you will start looking at the world in a better way. You will try to start understanding what the feels are that make you behave in a particular way. How have people shaped your path? And where have they used think instead of emotion to try to get you to do something? So with that, thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Hi Ray, thanks very much for another really great webinar. We've got one question already, and this is from Stephen Edel, who is saying, thinking about the popcorn example, yes, the graphic is compelling, but did it work? Did people buy smaller bags of popcorn?
I believe from the Chip and Dan Heath, it did for a while. Because to some extent, you're pushing uphill. Your budget is not as good as the people who are putting it forward. So it had a blip, but it wasn't a sustained change, as we can see by the waistlines in Western society.
That's a very diplomatic way to say. Now, there are lots of compelling statistics that we see in the news, whether it's about politics or health or something else. 99% of people do this. 85% of people do that. Quite, high numbers that you would think should be enough on its own to persuade people of something. Now, when those kind of what we think are fail-safe statistics don't work, what do you find helps when we're reporting insights, when we've got those kind of quantitative statistics? Do you find that maybe putting quotes from verbatim responses helps from participants, or something else?
If you can get real life stories. So I remember one situation where a piece of research was done. It wasn't a piece of research that I'd been involved in, but I saw the debriefing of it. And the opening of the packs was really problematic. And they had very strong data saying people hated this new packaging. They tended to spill the contents. And management were somewhat reluctant to believe it because they could all open the packs. But then they were showing a couple of videos of people not being able to do it. And then, oh yeah, okay, now we can see it's true and we'll take it from there. So video is a fantastic way. If you can find a suitable, credible, convincing story that backs up what your numbers say, then that is how you make it convincing. Just repeating a big number or breaking it into lots and lots of subgroups, which would be a typical quantitative analyst's way of doing it. Say, well, look, let me show you how young men think. Here's how old men think. Here's how young women think. Here's how old women think. Now, surely you're going to believe me and do it. If they don't feel it's right, they don't feel it's right.
Right, so video can be a compelling addition, which actually leads very nicely to a question from an attendee, Tish Pascal, who's asking, who's saying, I'm a researcher, I deal in facts, so visualization is not easy for me. I don't have a staff behind me to customize my facts into pictures. Any advice? And on that note, Ray, I think both of us probably have some tips for Tish there.
Yes, I mean, I watch what other people have done and copy. And if I copy, I also cite and credit people where I've copied it from. And when I say copy, they might use a picture of a waterfall pouring over somebody's head, and I might use a drain or a leaky roof. I won't copy necessarily the image, but I'll look at the metaphor and say, yes, that's a nice way of describing it. The first time I heard somebody, only when they pitched the film Jaws, they said, sorry, the film Alien, they said, it's Jaws in space. And you listen to that, you think, right, when the time comes, I will adapt that and use it, because that's a nice way of describing something.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, visual metaphors work great. And Tish, for anybody else, now Ray's suggestion earlier of taking photographs, so you build a library of your own visual images, is great. Now for many of us who have run out of storage on our phones, my recommendation is to use copyright and royalty-free websites that have great quality images, like unsplash.com, unsplash.com. Now, for icons and things like that, you can go to flaticon.com, the Noun Project, IconsDB. So if you're not a graphics designer, actually there's lots of free and content out there. But I would always recommend as well getting to grips, even on a basic level, with graphic design software like Photoshop. It's an excellent transferable skill to have and is going to be fantastic for you, even when you're just trying to make your PowerPoint presentations just that little bit more visual.
And I'm also going to sort of back up on something else, or two things. First of all, there's a webinar with 8 speakers on the topic of visualization and storytelling coming up in November. And you can find out about that from the NewMR website. The next thing that I would say is that too many people get the time allocation wrong when they're creating presentations. They will keep working the data until the last minute. And actually, you need to stop much earlier. And then you need to leave time for fine-tuning the story, making sure that it has the emotional message. And then you need to leave time for practicing and rehearsing the presentation. Because a part of conveying the emotional message will be to present it well. And that requires presentation rehearsal as well as practice, as well as spending time on getting that story right and the layout right. And a large part of that getting it right is removing things.
Ray, that leads on nicely to another question as well. So this is perhaps where, if you've practiced your presentation very well, you might get asked some off-the-cuff questions from the stakeholders. So Martin Roos has asked, if the audience asks questions like, well, how much difference will it make if we do X, or give me an example of what will happen if we do Y, doesn't that move us back to facts and data rather than, say, the emotional storytelling?
The reason that we are in the room is that we're good at facts and data. So we are absolutely the people that should be there, because when they ask a question like, well, what if we did this instead, or what if that, we will have looked at it as part of our analysis process. We will have established why this is the recommendation, why the other things are not the recommendation. I will normally have far more slides in my deck that I won't show, ready in case somebody's got a question. I will also know masses more than is even in my extra slides. One of the things you should never ever do, it's so dangerous, is tell the client everything you know. So you've only learned enough to be able to do the presentation, because then when the questions come, you can't extend the discussion and earn the right to be treated as a recommender of action. If all you can do is parrot what's in the presentation, why should anybody believe you? But if they ask you some hard questions and then you prove that you have worked with that data, you understand that data, you are going to be trusted next time round without the questions.
Right, that's a really good point. And I guess being prepared for those off-the-cuff questions means knowing your client's business very well, so that you can be prepared to kind of link that data to your recommended actions for the client. But what if, and Ray, I'm sure you've had this experience as well, where you might be working with maybe another market research agency or directly with a brand who isn't exactly sure how the research findings are going to link into business action. Where that sort of thing occurs, what would your advice be to the person in the room who needs to be doing the reporting?
So the starting point is that before you present to a room full of clients, you will have presented perhaps on Skype or GoToMeeting or Zoom or something to the insight manager. You'd have had several two forwards and backwards with the insight manager, because you can't actually make business recommendations unless you know the client's business inside out already, because you've got an ongoing relationship. You will make what you think are going to be the right recommendations, and then you will talk to the insight manager. And the insight manager will say, oh no, we've already tried that. Or, oh, that's a really good, yes, that will go well. Actually, they always refer to this region, not that region, or they use this language here. So you're looking for all of those bits and pieces in your communication with the insight manager. Just occasionally, you will find out the insight manager has no idea why the brand manager asked for this research or what they're going to do. So you will try to speak to the brand manager, and in about half the situations you won't be allowed to, in which case you will have to fall back on data reporting. You can't go out on a limb if the client isn't cooperating to some extent with telling you what the business question is and what the wider context is.
Agree. And Ray, last question, unless we get some more from the attendees, and this one coming back to games, which is of course something that really interests me. Now, what would you think about an option for interactive insight reporting, making that into something that's a little bit more like a game or quiz-like, where, especially if you've got a segmentation study, you can ask the clients to be involved in answering questions about what this segment does, or a little bit more knowledge about another segment. Do you think that kind of interactive reporting could be effective, or does it sort of depend on the client?
Oh, it massively depends on the client, because some do not want to do anything but give me just the nuts and the bolts, the shortest time possible. Others are prepared to spend longer, because that sort of interactive format, people can learn it and feel it better, but it will take longer. So again, you're probably going to earn your right to do that by doing it a little bit, a few times, and then building it through. But if you take a segmentation, you might say, right, here are the 6 groups we have found. I'm not going to tell you what percentage of the business. I want you all to now have a discussion and tell me what percentage of the business you think they account for and why. And then we're going to reveal those numbers, and we're going to discuss why you were right when you were right and where you were wrong when you were wrong. Now, that immediately tells you the sort of clients this would be bad for. Any client that does not like ever being wrong isn't going to respond well to that particular technique.
No.
So it's different games for different clients. It's different styles for different clients.
Okay, Ray, well, we don't have any more questions from attendees, so I guess it's back over to you for the closing notes.
So with that, thank you all for attending. Thank you, Betty, so much for handling the Q&A and moderation, and I look forward to next time.